Please note that this episode was recorded and edited before the announcement of Adam Simpson's firing and before any of the tribunal outcomes. Benjamin's still a dumbass, though. This is Benjamin, by the way. It's me, I'm the dumbass.
Ethan and Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Timber!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre.
Meet the man who bet a 216-kilometer walk on the Swans beating the Saints. Me!
This is episode 189 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle, and there's a good chance if you're listening to this, you're new because Benjamin did something really fucking stupid. So, I'm Ethan, that's Benjamin. He's a dumbass.
I pulled a Jim Rooker and bet a lengthy walk on a funny result, and the Saints beat the Swans. So sometime probably in December, late December, around the time of my winter break, I will be walking from San Diego to Los Angeles. Now, I like urban walks in the first place. I've been planning to, try to walk down the peninsula to San Jose when I'm back home as kind of a test run for things, but I didn't think I'd start just with this, and I didn't think that this would actually happen, but the Saints actually had license to go fast when they needed to, and just very impressed with the game that they played, and shocked that the Swans were that inaccurate and dropped a couple in a row. I'm not making another bet this year. Actually, I think the next time a bet is made, it'll have to be you, Ethan.
All right, well, I'm not going to bet something that stupid. I mean, there are so many other things you could have done. You could have bet to paint your nails in Saints colors. You could have bet to, dress up as Saint KFC and go to church. You could have gone to church in a Swan costume. You could have done something Swan or Saint related. You could have dressed up as Colonel Sanders and gone to Swan Lake. You could have gotten your back waxed. You could have done the cinnamon challenge. You could have done like the IHOP challenge or whatever, or Denny's, since there aren't really Waffle Houses around here. But you chose this.
The others are too tame, except for the cinnamon challenge maybe because I have asthma.
For those of you that haven't listened before, the way we do this, we kind of just recap each game one by one, but I think we have to talk more about the reason most of the newcomers are here. Now, we're going to learn how you would interpret things like, a lot of being a Supreme Court judge is about, how do you interpret the Constitution? So we're going to learn how loosely or closely you interpret things.
I was under the impression that I would be, just walking the whole way, at the most, maybe Ubering to a motel or something at the end of the night, if that.
All that was said was you have to walk from San Diego to Los Angeles. It was not said that you specifically have to do anything in any specific order or that it has to all be in once. You could Forrest Gump it and just walk and not shave the entire time and have a really comically long beard by the end.
How much can it really grow in a week to 10 days, though? I'm not, that hirsute.
Personally, I would not do it backpacking. I would rather deal with the logistics of drive to somewhere, park your car wherever you're going to finish for the day, get a ride back to the start, which you'll mostly be in populated areas. So it'll be a few dollars for for ride sharing, but it won't be super difficult. It may just be a little costly. I'd rather walk twice the distance with just a day's worth of water and snacks than have to carry a backpack. The only stretch I think is really going to be tricky to figure out is Oceanside to San Clemente. And the other stipulation that you're definitely going to have to do is that you got to do it from south to north. It's not LA to San Diego.
I said San Diego to Los Angeles, and my endpoint will be the handprints outside the Chinese Theater in Hollywood.
So, I mean, in theory, what you could do is like walk from start to finish for the day and then instead of get a ride, walk back. But just as long as you mark your start and finish each day and start, pick up where you stopped the previous day, that's fine.
My thought about doing it was, during my winter break, maybe I'd have to break to be home for a bit, but at the most in 2 stints. And, maybe I don't think I'd, drive to and from San Diego every day. At some point, I'd probably be driving from LA.
Yeah, you'd like get a hotel somewhere in Orange County at some point or somewhere in LA.
And the nice thing also is it allows me to get in much better shape as well. I've got 5.5 months to prepare.
I will definitely make sure, we'll be giving you updates throughout this entire process. But I have a few ideas that could make this more fun.
Fun for me or fun for you?
Just more fun. I was thinking maybe you could wear like a sandwich board, like, like those religious wackos wear, except instead of like repent or the end is near, it just says, I am a dumbass. And then I was thinking, let's see, if you go through like South Central LA at all, I was thinking, you go like wearing all red and blasting music by YG as loud as possible. Like red shirt, hat, pants, shoes, shoelaces, everything. Like go through Crip controlled territory wearing all red, blasting YG and singing along word for word. You really got to get into the dialect.
This just in, Ethan wants to host this podcast solo from 2025.
And then I was also thinking, if this happens again next year, you could do it wearing a salmon suit.
This is a one-off.
Yeah, I would not have agreed to do something like this, but you did, and there was no way you're backing out of it now, and I hope it rains the entire time. I really hope it rains, like, nonstop. The only other stipulation I have is just that you chronicle it, and hopefully, we do know some people in the LA area and stuff, so hopefully we can get other people at least to be there at the finish line or something.
I think it would be funnier if it was just me with absolutely no support whatsoever.
Also, you remember like the article about Leanne like discovering Frio, right? I was thinking, we are not doing this for clout. Please let it, that we are not doing this for clout. Just like how the guy who was eating the rotisserie chickens wanted it to be clear that it was not a party. Like, I feel like there should be at least like one article that's going to be written. Something like, Idiot American loses footy bet, walks to Los Angeles. Like at least a small column somewhere. But yeah, other than that, can be pretty loose about the requirements. It's really just up to your interpretation, but we will keep you updated on this. There will be no trading your feet for 2 wheels like Jake Mintz did with turning his walk from New York to Chicago into a bike ride. There will be no walking the equivalent distance on a treadmill. So the actual footy this week, the way we divided up the games, almost exclusively, I got the good ones and you got the crappy ones. I guess the round finale looks like it was pretty good, or at least gave us a lot of talking points. I never mentioned, I am coming to you from Fairfield, Idaho, which is a town of about 460 people, about 90 minutes east of Boise, where I'm driving into tomorrow and then flying home.
Hey, Grind will actually see you again, our executive producer.
And you're coming to us from San Diego. This round was, well, I guess not quite a no-fly zone because the Bombers won. I guess if they had lost 2, it would have been a no-fly zone, but it was a bird strike for the first time since, what'd you say, round 8 of 2022? Was that it?
Yeah, that's right. So all the avian teams lost. Collingwood, Hawthorn, West Coast, Sydney, and Adelaide. I guess one thing that carried throughout the round is no true road wins, I guess. I can't say every game was a home win because Collingwood was a designated home team as they 12-8-80 were defeated by Essendon 13-14-92. And yes, Collingwood will have the outnumber there in terms of fans, over 81,500 in fact. But you still can't call it a true road game. But, no interstate wins or anything of that sort. And there were no alternate sites this week either. I think we're getting one next week. There'll be a game in Launceston, but at the G on Friday, it started out as the Jack Crisp show. He kicked 3 very quickly in the first quarter, and that is his second career 3-goal game, his first in nearly 10 years. From there, though, Essendon stabilized and went in front with a 4-0 third quarter and kept their distance from there.
Yeah, looking at it, this round had 8 defeateds and 1 defeated bye. Last round, there were 5 defeated byes, and I thought there would be at least 1 or 2 more.
I really thought there would be 1 more.
I ended up watching this game on a slight delay. I was sleeping in my hotel room in Salt Lake City at the very start of this game. And I wish I had experienced it all live because it would have been a really fun one to experience live through social media. I still got my fill and got to analyze the game pretty thoroughly. But my main takeaway was that normally Collingwood wins games where, yes, they get a star performance from Nick Dacos, but they get depth guys stepping up. And that's where, the absence of Beau McCreary was certainly notable. Whereas Essendon, I think they had, a couple of star-worthy performances. Zach Merritt, maybe Jai Caldwell as well, Sam Durham. But it was their depth that really stepped up. Where, everyone played a role at some point. Harry Jones doing a little of everything, which is really nice considering the miss he had against Collingwood a couple of years ago.
You know how much of an advocate I am for just tall players being more versatile in general. I love tall midfielders like Connor Nash. I really like tall wings, and Harry Jones is developing into more of a tall wing, and that's even with Xavier Dursma being back. You see Dursma starting more in the defensive 50 a lot of time, going between 50s. He got a goal in this one, but Jones just having high work rate there, actually on the wing and freeing up some other players. I think the structure in general is a bit more fluid for Essendon. You've got the three in the middle with Caldwell, Durham, and Merritt, but I think things have been more flexible in general. And Durham may have had the best or second best, I'll say, job on Nick Dacos this year, preventing effective kicks while still getting his own in support of Zach Merritt.
There was just a lot of different players stepping up and having their moments. Like I said, Ben Mackay had a really poor start to the game with a couple of god-awful turnovers and then really settled in and anchored the defense. Just having all of him, Ridley, and Laverde is a really nice luxury to have. And I think it's worth noting, Essendon's defense has usually not been good in recent years, but they rarely had their full defense.
Also helping, Jake Kelly back from illness. He had the job on Bobby Hill. And Dylan Shield, his first game in the 22 this year, his first full game since round 9 last year, he closed really strongly with 7 contested possessions out of a 12-touch fourth quarter.
And it never felt like, Collingwood's going to make that charge. Here we go. Maybe if Bobby Hill gets that goal and cuts it to 12 at the end of the third quarter, it really feels like it. Instead, Essendon gets 2 in the first 2 minutes of the fourth. Collingwood did get it down to 19 with 7.5 left and 13 with a little under 3 minutes left, but it never felt like it was really in danger. And then once Josh Dacos missed with about 1:40 left, yes, it made it a 2-kick game, but that really felt like it was it.
This was a game that Essendon really controlled, especially in the second half. They were composed from a contested play in the back. It's a bellwether stat for them. Look at their uncontested marks. If they get above their average, getting into the high 80s or the 90s, that's a pretty good sign. Well, how about 36 uncontested marks in the third quarter alone, which is the second most this season, and 129 for the game? That's also a sign that Collingwood weren't able to put on the same pressure. They had 1 tackle inside 50 in the first 3 quarters and just 4 for the game. I think Beau McCreary's absence is really telling there. Remember, he strained his soleus last week. You talk about, Ethan, how he makes winning plays, and it's those things that, you don't see unless you go into the My Stats categories on the AFL stats page, if that, in terms of the pressure, just physically and also psychologically there. Collingwood are going to have to really, really make up for that. Also doesn't help that Brody Majacek ruptured a pectoral tendon, so he's out for the rest of the home and away season. There was concern about Darcy Cameron as well. This is a really rocky look up front, though, for the Pies, and no obvious solutions, especially because Billy Frampton should still be in the back. I mean, that's a question, actually, because he did manage to take Peter Wright out of the game for decent segments, but you need more actual goal-kicking forwards, and I think that just means a lot of responsibility for Nathan Kruger. If when Mason Cox gets back, really pushing him into the lineup as quickly as possible. That's still, though, 2 to 4 weeks out there. Dan McStay would actually be the linchpin there, and he might play a half in the 2s this coming week.
Yeah, I thought he was totally lost for the season, so that would be enormous. You know what I think whenever I think about a pectoral injury, right?
Well, it's another black and white team.
Yes, with us tonight and always.
Eloy Jimenez, he ripped a titty.
Yes, the 2021 White Sox acting like Eloy Jimenez fucking died, when in reality he got hurt in the spring training game and it took him out for like half the season. Like during the introductions for opening night, they had a teammate holding up his jersey and they had it hanging in the clubhouse. Like, no, that's something that's done when somebody dies.
In terms of positives for Collingwood, obviously there's Crisp and how he started. steal side bottom ever present. More so on the outside, still had 34 disposals. But aside from those two, there wasn't all that much. I'll credit Ned Long for showing well as a sub on debut. Played about a third of the game and gave them a boost in the fourth quarter. I'd like to see him get a full game this coming week.
I actually am going to kind of compliment Nick Dacos here because he had by his standards, a bad game, which was low efficiency to go with 31 disposals and 12 clearances. A bad Nick Dacos game is basically like a solid Jack Vivey game.
Thinking back to just my question on Billy Frampton, it's also because, Darcy Moore still isn't the do-everything defender that Collingwood has really asked him to be. This team doesn't really have a shutdown one-on-one defender. They have great roving defenders, but they don't have that one-on-one guy. Especially when you got Jeremy Howe pushing forward as well. I think you have to sacrifice that sort of defensive forward that Frampton has been and bring him back there to try and stabilize things one-on-one to enable Moore to do that sweeping. And I think that one-on-one defender is probably the biggest need for Collingwood going into next season. So watch for them to push things a bit in terms of trading.
One last thing about this game, I noticed Magpie Jesus, but it wasn't just waving his flag after a goal. He was just in the front row and was cheering after a defensive spoil or something right at the goal line.
Oh, how have we not mentioned Nate Caddy, by the way? People are obsessing over the fact that he's 19, and yeah, to be as strong-handed as he is at 19 is impressive. I mean, this guy's probably going to be pretty terrifying, and I think his rise also makes us more surprised that Harry Jones has been able to stick into the side.
Yeah, they've been able to find a way to work in a combination of Caddy, Jones, Langford, and Wright.
It's come at the cost of Todd Goldstein, but you can see that coming.
North Melbourne, 13-9-87, defeating Gold Coast, 12-11-83. The Suns are still winless on the road. North Melbourne wins in Victoria for the first time since round one of last year against the Eagles.
What does Bailey J. Williams even do? That was that game. Here's this here. This is from Swamp. Damien Hardwick was 19-1 as a player at Marvel. 19-1. Since saying, may my height come in here. He is 0-8-1 coaching there. He took the Marvel curse with him to the Suns, and that just compounds on the road woes that they already have. The Docklands gods are continuing to exact vengeance. And Dimas said, post-game, I'm angry as a footy club. We've got to grow the fuck up, to be perfectly honest. You've got to grow the fuck up and start complimenting those Docklands gods.
You know, it's funny you said 0-8-1, and I still remember the one better than any of the other losses.
I remember one of the losses being just a really ugly Tigers performance against the Suns. I think that was another fine game for Noah Anderson against his childhood club. But yeah, the one obviously stands out. That was the Noah Cumberland play-on game against Freo.
Reviewing this game, I don't think the Suns played that poorly. I just thought North played a really good game. Maybe I'm being too nice. I mean, I'm trying to think about negatives for the Suns. Jack Lukosius was very quiet.
Lukosius did have one snap goal.
Didn't notice much of Nick Holman or Ben Ainsworth. Sam Collins had a down week a week after being really good. And all of those guys were significant a week earlier. Bodie Hewlin was okay, but quieter.
Ainsworth you noticed because of the late miss. I remember a lot of people calling one of the most unclutch players in the game, and that last week was a complete aberration.
I know he was their lead possession guy, but I thought it was mostly just a volume game from Noah Anderson. That's funny because I think back to the loss to the Saints and I think Hardwick was more calling out their defenders that day, but could this refer to him or did I just not see it well? I'm not sure. But I didn't think Anderson was noteworthy. He just ended up with a lot of possessions. I thought Matt Rowell, even for what could have been considered one of his less impactful games, still 8 tackles, 7 clearances. I did think Ned Moyle got totally outclassed by Tristan Jerry. It happens. You wish you had Jared Witts for that. I don't recall which was Witt's best game, the one against the Eagles, or was he getting that game up in Darwin too? I don't remember.
He had a goal on 37 hitouts and 5 tackles against North in round 9. He was even more active in that game against the Eagles. Those are the two, though, right there. And Moyle is definitely still growing as an AFL level ruckman. I think another year of tutelage behind Waits will do him a lot, and the Suns clearly believe in him. But Jerry is also one of the most improved players across the AFL this year. This just continues an extremely rewarding arc for him.
I just thought what really won North this game was more their second level of players rather than the main core. Like, yes, Harry Sheasel was good. Colby McKercher was active and had a 4-bounce assist. Charlie Comben has become a first-level guy for them. Jai Simpkin has totally redeemed himself after such a bad start to the year.
Nick Larkey with 3 goals, bouncing back from 2 quiet weeks. Really, it had been 2 3/4 quiet weeks because he just had the 4-quarter goal against the Pies, and that was it.
Yeah, he got the better of Sam Collins. But like I said, it was really that next level of guys, specifically Bailey Scott and Tom Powell. Tom Powell, 22 disposals at 100% efficiency. I think he was my favorite player in this game. 9 of those 22 were contested as well. I thought he was spectacular, and I know that volume gets the attention, but I thought he was great.
How about that Torp assist that Liam Shields ran onto?
I had highlighted Liam Shields as a guy who needed to step up without George Wardlaw. I know his numbers weren't great, but he did a solid job. And he's now like getting into the position that where he's giving the contributions that you would ask for out of a 33-year-old instead of asking him to do way too much. And then I know he only got credited with 4 disposals, but I didn't think it would impact him much. Bringing in Bryn Teakle has been a good move.
It was pretty obvious to me, actually. Of course, one of the things that any team needs is support for their main tall. North didn't really have that unless it was Cherry pushing up forward. They had swung Toby Pink forward at times, and that was not working super well. Pink has grown into a forward spot a bit after being, Sandful Team of the Year defender, helping Glenelg to a flag. But having just another physical guy in there who can also relieve Jerry a bit in the ruck when needed is exactly what North needed. And Bryn Teakle was someone that I had spotted as a possibility for them. He's the first ever double midseason draft pick. Remember, he'd gotten really unlucky at Port. He broke his clavicle in his debut in the AFL. I remember that was against the Swans a couple years ago. New start for him and making the most of it so far. I hope North keep him on. I was worried in this game that Harry Sheasel was going to be locked into a back roll, half-back roll, just because with Zach Fisher out hurt, that void seemed to be there, and Sheasel had been the one to be in that role in the past. But no, he kept his more active role, kept his perfect accuracy on set shots this year as well, despite the commentator's curse and the graphic curse. So there's that. Also would throw Will Phillips into that second level. He did some work on Matt Rowell, who I thought was untaggable, and eventually switched to Tuke Miller. Then Tuke Miller injured his wrist. But losing him hurt, and so did losing Sam Day, who actually totally bullied Charlie Comben early, and then Comben settled in against him. Day had 8 marks. Felt like he had more than 2 goals, I think, because he also had an assist. But let's look at the things that North was able to win in spite of. They won despite Cam Zurhaar only having 9 disposals and not having the ball at all in the first quarter and kicking just 1 goal. They won despite Eddie Ford not kicking a goal, who still was like a live wire up front, ended up with a couple of behinds. They won without an especially good game from Jackson Archer. They had enough of that next level guy lift, and that was really cool to see. And again, I don't think the Suns played that poorly. I thought Will Powell had a pretty decent game. I thought Alex Sexton was pretty good, although he kind of faded in the second half. Something out David Swallow seemed kind of weird. And then, surprise, I liked how Sam Closey played. That's kind of true every week. Also, Mac Andrew kicked his first career goal, which was awesome. Yeah, I was on a give and go there with Boyle. Was waiting for it to happen. Finally did. I thought, man, could this actually be the curse breaker? No. The voodoo on Hardwick is too powerful. Ooh, Ethan, I know you are the coach's votes guy, and these are a bit of a doozy this week. Actually, I won't say a bit. We have 8 games with perfect 10s. The other has 2 9s. But most other things are an absolute mess. We've got 2 games with 10 and 5 4s. And then we've got one which is imperfect aside from the best on ground. And it's the bet game.
Almost every game has at least 7 vote getters. I think like 6 of them do. We obviously have one with 9. And this kind of validates me because there were a couple of games I was watching where I just didn't feel like any one guy had really taken over. And I guess on some of those games, the coaches did feel one guy had taken over. But like beyond that, there was a lot of confusion. I'm not sure which round they're going to stop showing the coaches' votes then, because they're still showing them as now. Maybe it's starting in round 19. I'm not sure, but I love this one in particular. Because what a beautiful set of games.
So the other Saturday afternoon game, Port Adelaide 15-12, 102, defeating the Bulldogs 8-6-54, a real return to form for the Power in so many ways, was one of those weird ones. Connor Rozee was regarded as the clear best on ground, and I fully endorse that. Zach Butters got rattled at times, was actually subbed off in the third. I would consider it a victory cigar sub still, even though he was getting pretty heated and maybe close to being reported. He was second best. Oftentimes, Rozee has played second fiddle to Butters this year. It was the other way around in this one. From the middle, it was the Rozee, Butter, Wines trio. In the first quarter alone, they combined for 45 touches, the most by any trio in a quarter this century, and the domination continued from there. For the game, Butters, Horn-Francis, Rozee, and Wines combined for, get this, 6 goals from 119 disposals.
Amazing. Couldn't ask for better. Even in victory, they managed that. I had said I had no idea where this game was going to go. I thought it would either be really close or a blowout, and I couldn't tell you which way it would go. What happened here? Did the Dogs not really tag anybody? I'm going to also assume that the absences of Liam Jones and Cody Waitman were significant.
Yeah, those absences were pretty significant. In particular, with Jones, it meant they had much more trouble against Mitch Georgiadis, who had a career-high 5 goals and has been suspended for a 1-game strike off the ball on Nick Caulfield. That suspension has been straight up accepted. The Bulldogs did turn up the pressure throughout the game, just the heat in general. It was more than just a bit of banter. But the Power responded and it doesn't make sense to me why the Bulldogs keep getting beaten by hard-running midfielders, handballs from the clearance, and kicks to the corner. They can't really play at their own game. They can't defend their own game. You've got these defenders who are practicing against this corridor-based offense the whole way. You should know what to expect there, and yet they seem to be caught off guard by it every time. It feels like there's some sort of miscommunication. There's some sort of, I don't want to say lack of proper training. Again, you're going up against Bontempelli, the Pretore, Trelaw, Richards in practice. I don't really know what it is, but there's a real disconnect there. And also, they didn't limit Kane Farrell or even more so Dan Houston in terms of those handball receivers in the middle. Jason Dunstall criticized that at halftime, and I was right with him. Really no attention paid to Houston. You think back to the Thursday game that the Power lost to Carlton a few weeks back, and they had Zach Williams and one other. May have been Lockie Fogarty, I forget, but just playing sort of a defensive forward job on Farrell and Houston to prevent them from getting those runs and easy handball receives. They were free to do what the fuck ever they wanted in this game. I think that in part, though, might be enabled by the inclusion of a youngster. Whereas you especially saw Farrell having a lot of time kicking out of defense, getting some kick-ins, that kicking from fullback and defensive 50 in general, some of that responsibility has gone toward Logan Evans, just his third game, but making strong decisions from the back. And I'm really liking the way that he's looking for Port as a whole.
It's funny. On our last episode, I was saying how Port doesn't utilize the wing enough. And then in this game, they also didn't utilize the wing much, but it didn't seem to hurt them because they were so good through the middle.
They did have some opportunities there. Jace Burgoyne was involved in some of that. Travis Boak got a good amount of touches on the wing. But when you see that you're beating an opponent with your normal game plan, why adjust? Really, a lot of it went through, obviously, that quartet, but also strong center half forward play. Jackson Mead with 6 scored involvements in the first half alone. He's really embraced that role. I think he might have been your sleeper pick this year.
I believe so. So I've got this game to catch up on and a few others. Being in Miami last week contributed, which again was not just like a crazy bender. It was a cultured trip. It was really fun. But I'm still doing some catching up. Who was good for the Bulldogs? Who would you consider for polished turd?
I think it would probably be Adam Trelaw rather than Bontempelli. Bont managed to step out and get his touches, but it was more so in the second half, and I was just noticing more from Trelaw in terms of general flow. So that's a possibility. I think Rory Lobb continues to be a defensive positive, and it's interesting now that he's doing some tall position coach work with the AFLW side. Maybe some of the trade talk has simmered down there. But yeah, the defenders were regularly beaten And that was even before James O'Donnell suffered a concussion and was ruled out. Also, Aaron Naughton was concussed from an incident that I think was early in the second quarter. And so that meant they were down even more men. I mean, it wasn't looking good from really the start of the game, but once he saw Naughton went down, he knew, all right, there's no possibility things will change from here. 44 was the Bulldogs' second greatest halftime deficit in the Luke Beveridge era. And remember, this is his 10th year at the helm. Bontempelli, no first half clearances.
Wow. That's, unless Libba had like 7 or 8, that's really stunning.
Domination from Rosie, Butters, and Wines with help from Horn Francis. And Connor Rosie was one of the star performers of the entire round. Just looking back at Rosie's numbers, it's pretty ridiculous stuff. A goal 2 from 36, actually only 7 clearances, but the 8 tackles as well. I think a lot of the clearance work was also propelled by Jordan Sweet, just straight up beating Tim English in the headouts. Is he just looking like this one-year wonder at this point?
I don't think so. I think this year is the aberration. I think he's a really good player.
And I'll note that maybe one of the reasons why Rosie's numbers weren't even higher was that he was the one that was beating Bontempelli at stoppages in the first place. Also didn't help that the Bulldogs weren't getting great setup kicks. Now, the forwards have had a lot of trouble marking as of late, especially Jamara, and that's another reason why Waitman and then Naughton being out hurt even more, but they just didn't generate scores from the back 2/3 because of those disconnects late.
I just thought of something. I like Tim English, and I know of some other really cool people named Tim, but it's hard to sound tough being named Tim, or Timothy, or Timmy. You know, I can't imagine like, oh God, run, it's Tim.
Well, unless it's an enchanter, yeah. Geelong 16-14-110, defeating Hawthorn 9-5-59. Hawks fans, hope you enjoyed your trip down the highway. See you in another 18 years. Happy 200th game, Gary Rowan. He did kick his 2, and it was early, and you know what tends to happen there.
I don't know which part of this game I liked more, the part where the Cats won or the part where Hawthorn lost. You know, I had said that unlike the Richmond win, the win against Essendon last week looked like a revival, a return to Geelong football. And I felt that this game was more of the same, just pretty thorough dominance. In 3 weeks, Sam De Koning has gone from worst ruck ever to we may actually legit have something. He outplayed Lloyd Meek in the first half. Not that Meek was playing poorly. De Koning just looked really good, and he's got some confidence back. You know, I've talked before, and the guys at the Hoops crew have really hammered home, just like his body language is very obvious. You can tell when it's going well, and you can tell when it's going poorly. And he had a swagger in this game. He had his first career multi-goal game, and he was awesome. And the best thing is, you could legitimately construct like a top 5 players and not even include him. Because there were just a lot of guys who had their moments. Jeremy Cameron kicked 3 behinds in the first 2.5 minutes. And still ended up having a great game. Tom Stewart rotating between the middle and the back was awesome. Probably helped that Jack Ginnivan wasn't there to play him. Turned out he had a crack in his fibula. And they ended up replacing Ginnivan with Seamus Mitchell, which is not like for like at all. And Mitchell didn't play very well.
And you can't have, Nick Watson trying to do that because Watson has his use elsewhere, and Stewart can just outsize him as well as the other issue there. I mean, it's not like Stewart's big, but he could push a guy like Watson around. Now, Watson did kick one, missed his first shot, though. That's another reason why Geelong won. The combination of Stewart and Dangerfield in the middle just brings a lot of the physicality and the power running that the Cats had needed for a while, and you can add even more physicality in with the, I believe it was 14 tackles from third gamer Sean Mena.
Holy shit, he was good.
This is the type of stuff we'd been seeing last year with Werribee and in the twos, less of actually getting the ball forward. But the biggest thing they needed from him was the pressure. I'd like to see him maybe trade off a bit more with Brian Myers in terms of the actual forward looks. Yes, Brian kicked a goal, but another one of the reasons that Mena was brought up was his 6-goal performance against Sandringham. Yet to kick an AFL goal. It'll come soon. I'd like for them to just figure out a bit of that split better. I don't want them to fix too much because it's not broken right now, but it's something else that they could find.
You had a game where you could legitimately argue that neither Max Holmes or Zach Guthrie were among Geelong's 10 best players, and they've been 2 of the most consistent all year. But it was kind of like it was a midfield by committee, which, when you don't have a Bontempelli or a Lachie Neale or a Cripps, you're going to have to do. And, when you combine Mana's tackling and then a high possession game for Jack Bowes, who I thought was really good despite low efficiency, and Tom Atkins, even though his numbers weren't huge, just always being around the play, doing gritty Tom Atkins stuff, and Patrick Dangerfield making the most out of his 14 touches before getting subbed off. Sort of a victory cigar, sort of a don't pull another hamstring. Like, this looked like the team that I'm familiar with. Another quality game from Mark Blitzovs. Guys that I had been critical of looked a lot better. Let's start with Jack Henry. He only allowed 2 leads all night. One led to a goal for Mitch Lewis, who then tore his ACL.
Unit lost.
Fuck. This is legitimately Hawthorne update. Fuck. This is another one where I could take a term from a now retired broadcaster that I do not like, Jack Edwards. Ugly geometry in that collision with Jake Kulak. Clearly, no malice there. He had also had his head bleeding after that. I'm still surprised that they didn't call anything on that. To have him coming back and immediately tear his ACL after having knee problems to begin with is just a cruel thing to have to deal with.
I will say, umpiring in this game actually favored Geelong, which was refreshing.
Holy fuck, you admit it.
It was not why they won this game by 51. And if set shot kicking was better, this would have been an 80-point win. But yeah, Jack Henry was good. Jake Kolajashny didn't have any really bad turnovers and just had a rock-solid game one-on-one defending. He's been pressed into defending against bigger guys and done well with it. Mitch Duncan, he had a bad early turnover or two, and other than that was excellent. He looks re-energized, and it's kind of cool seeing, he and Lawson Humphreys having similar skill sets. And there's kind of a passing of the torch going on here, and maybe also seeing Humphreys and knowing that he's not going to be doing this for that much longer, maybe that lit a fire under Duncan. I thought this was definitely one of Duncan's better games. You saw some of the speed, you definitely saw the field vision that has made him so valuable. And Humphreys, for as little as he got targeted by his teammates, still ended up racking up 17 disposals and had a couple of really nice deliveries. And I'm just super excited about him. Seems like a player with a really high floor.
I saw that moment, I think it was in the second quarter, where he kind of kicked his first goal in his head before he actually really got it on his boot in the first place, and still managed to help generate a goal as well. That was one of Brad Close's 4 goals. Brad Close gets the ball, good things happen. Shocker.
I was talking about this with Ben on the post-game Hoops crew chat. Every time he touches the ball, you get a goal. That's simple.
Get Grind the ball, get Close the ball. That's really the solution at this point. And Myers put on a couple really nice setup kicks again, because that's what Brian Myers does.
He had one where he was between 2 defenders. I think it was the one where he hit Shannon Neal in the left pocket. Yeah, Shannon Neal used his hands. Ended up kicking 2-2 for the game.
I think, clearly because they won by so much, but Ollie Henry as a sub there was the right call to make sure that he and Gary Rowan didn't step on each other's toes too much.
I mean, I think it would have been tough if you were protecting a 2-goal lead or something. Then it's difficult. Subbing on a tall forward. I mean, I guess there's a world where you bring him in, slide Neal back into a ruck role, and slide DeConing back defensively.
And maybe even Stewart for some extra help as well. At this point, let Rowan be Rowan, because it's still working.
Yeah, that I'm definitely certain on. Ollie Dempsey, his speed is really good. He does not have the appearance of a basketball player, but I think it's going to get mentioned a lot now that, he spent a few years away from football, focusing on basketball. I believe he was a point guard, and I could see how he could be really effective on the drive. Also, Ollie Dempsey and Zach Guthrie and Mark Blitzovs and Sam DeConing all look like every Orioles prospect, if I haven't mentioned that. So does Harley Reid. Come home.
Who else can we put in there? Cody Waitman, I guess. Aaron Naughton.
Cody Waitman for sure.
Now, the curls might be too much to have Naughton in there.
Yeah, and it's also just too dark. Got to be blonde.
In terms of what did work for Hawthorne,
it's a pretty short list. Dylan Moore was very good. I think he was an easy polished turd. And Jeremy Impey did some nice sweeping work. James Warple was all right. I guess Connor McDonald was decent. But look, the Hawks were due for a down game. And it's not a coincidence that it came without Sicily and Ginnivan.
And also on a 6-day turnaround coming from the West. I don't think in the big picture this is a big issue here.
Since the loss to the Swans, they had played a bunch of really good games. They were due for this. I wouldn't look into it too much. I would be a little concerned about finding a way to defend without Sicily, because Sam Frost did nothing. Josh Weddle struggled. Jack Scrimshaw had a couple okay moments. What else? Jack Gunston got subbed off with a whopping 2 disposals, and every now and then he kicks a goal, but he looks pretty finished. I would be surprised if this is not his final season. He could still have a couple of moments left in him this year, but I'd be very surprised if he's playing in 2025. What concerned me the most about this game was the combination of midfielders. Warple, Newcomb, Day, and Nash. And, Day was about Hawthorne's only good player in the first quarter, and I guess Massimo started the game decently well. But it should have been a lot worse than 29-7. It should have been 7-2. It could have been like 44-1 before giving up a late goal. There felt like a couple moments in this game where the Hawks could have made a push. Geelong always made the next play. It was just the more mature team. And it was fun, reminding the Hawks, yes, their future is still extremely bright. But it's nice to put a team in their place, remind them we're still in charge here. I believe Too Short said it well. They can't play on my court, can't hang with the big dog, stay on the porch.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How do you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
I imagine that you will want to follow our journeys and really my journey when it happens. And also Ethan just has, a bunch of cool travel stuff that he does too. Maybe he'll post some of that at Castle Media, his personal. He'll probably post some of the photos of his reunion with Brian at Cat Named Brian on Instagram. My personal stuff, I'm not on my personal too much, but it's at BenjaminHK01. Collectively, it's at Americans Footy for pretty much everything.
GWS 18-8-116 defeating Carlton 16-8-104.
Hey, now that Largo's gone, we can play the forbidden music.
It didn't look like that for a while, that's for sure. First quarter, it was the highest scoring first quarter for a single team this season, with the Blues dropping 52. And then the Giants activated. What was it, Ethan? Because when the second quarter happened, now I've gone back and seen most of this game, but when the second quarter happened, I was starting on the watch of Freno and Richmond out west, and so I didn't catch it as much in real time. What did you notice in real time as to how the Giants got going?
So the Giants, over a stretch from the final minute of the first quarter to midway through the third, outscored the Blues 89-14. And I think sometimes the orange tsunami thing gets played up a little too much, but I think they really did reactivate it, sending everyone forward together, flooding to one side. And the two guys that really fueled that, one had a high possession game, the other was more renowned for his defense. I don't want to give too much away without you guessing. So try to guess which two players were the ones that I thought were the most significant.
Well, in terms of activating the tsunami, did Lockie Whitfield was he not the only source?
I didn't think he was that significant. I thought he played fine, and he ended up with 30 disposals, but he was hardly one of the guys that comes to mind.
Well, Whitfield tends to be the source of that, so the fact that they had more starting is huge there. I did notice Isaac Cumming getting further upfield, kicking a couple rows. A nice return to form for him over these past couple weeks.
This was the best game I've seen Isaac Cumming play since... I can't really think of one that stands out to me.
I think it's better than any game he played last year.
Oh, yeah. But you still haven't guessed it.
We were both really high on Darcy Jones from the first time we saw him at the AFL level. That Anzac night game against the Lions, his return meant a lot. I saw that right away.
I thought he was awesome. He gave them life in the forward 50, but I don't think he so much fueled the attack through the middle. He was definitely noticeable, though. He's a reason they suddenly, instead of struggling to reach 75 points, were into triple digits by the end of the third.
I think also to make up for Josh Kelly's out, Stephen Canelio conceded some of that forward rush to Jones and did a bit more laterally. In terms of the real fuelers, was I the one who alerted you to Finn Callahan?
Initially, yes.
I mean, he was picked, 3? He couldn't have been a real shock to anybody. And yet, because he plays for one of the expansion teams, he's so often overlooked. His long kick accuracy might already be the best left-footed kick in the league.
It wasn't quite to the length of like some of Jordan Dawson's kicks. And it was at a more like in sequences that were faster paced because that's just how the Giants play. But yes, I thought he was huge. I'm shocked that he wasn't in the coaches' votes. I thought he was probably the best player.
I've still got to pick some things apart there, but I got to say Callahan's probably in my top 3. I want to note good debut for Joe Fonte. He helped also in the back.
The other guy was Toby Bedford, who only had...
I mean, it was a tag job for him on Sam Walsh to start with. I know he did get a goal, I think, third quarter?
Yeah, he only had 16 disposals, but I thought just his speed and pace fueled so much, and everyone fed off of that. So I thought he was really vital. And then, yes, Tom Green did end up having a really good night possession-wise, and I think he and Steven Canelio combined to outdo Cripps and Walsh outside of the first quarter, because Cripps started this game absolutely on fire. Wow, neither Green or Canelio got into the coaches' votes, which is stunning to me, because usually a goal and 33 disposals does it, and then Canelio had a goal and 28. Each had 6 clearances. Canelio also had 2 assists. There were a lot of contributors, but the ones who stood out the most to me were Callahan and Bedford, and I think that's because of when they impacted things, and then Green and Canelio started to take over in the middle in contests off of that. And it's worth mentioning that while I still think he hasn't had a great year, Harry Himmelberg was definitely better after the first quarter. I loved this game out of Brent Daniels, even though he didn't kick a goal.
Did almost everything else, though. Got into the double digits for tackles. I think it was one of his highest disposal count games, period, and helped provide some accuracy and continuation of sequences in the 40 to 60 meter range.
Apparently, Jake Riccardi only had 1 tackle and 8 disposals, and I felt like he would have had like 15 disposals and 4 tackles. Maybe it's just every touch he had was significant. Maybe that's what it was. He's a surprisingly solid backup ruckman. Kieran Briggs got murked by Tom DeConing in the first quarter and then totally flipped the script on him. And Jack Buckley really shut Charlie Curnow down. Curnow did get a late goal, so that is 63 games in a row with a goal, but he got just the one.
I saw Buckley was super upset about allowing the one, too. It was a line on the ground, right in the goal square. Even though the game looked to be pretty stable from the Giants' point of view, I liked that Buckley still had that fire. It's like, fuck, I couldn't hold him goalless.
It's like how an NHL goalie gets really mad if they give up a shutout in the final minute. Like, who cares if the goal only cuts a 3-0 lead to 3-1? That stick is getting broken 100% of the time. The Blues, after getting down by as much as, 36, I think, was the largest deficit they faced, something like that. They did cut it to 12, which obviously was the final score, with 3.5 minutes left, and they got the ensuing clearance, but then James Peatling drew a high tackle against fellow sub Matt Owies, and the Giants kind of settled things down from there and finished it off. I think Michael Voss has done a really good job coaching this year, but he really messed up on one thing, leaving Brody Kemp on Jesse Hogan, who ended up kicking.
Yeah, that was a mistake there. Hogan with a bag of 5. There had to have been better answers. The fact that Mitch McGovern wasn't switched on to the number 1 guy, or that Wiedering didn't have a little bit of one-on-one time as well. There's got to be some sort of split there. And in terms of a size matchup, it looked like a miscue from the start, too.
Now, Wiedering did play through a corked thigh. He spent a lot of time down in the rooms and then jogging on the sidelines, but I still would have given him a try there. He still ended up with 87% time on ground. So basically, he only left the ground for that injury. I mean, 2 constants with Jacob Wiedering. 1, he gets disrespected by all Australian stuff. And 2, he's always playing through an injury.
Oh, yeah, Harry Mackay kicked 5 goals, and that's going to get overlooked because of the Giants' comeback. Mackay had 3 early ones.
Yeah, he had the first 3, and Lecolier struggled with him. This was not a good game for him. They need Sam Taylor back. Love Lecolier. This was not his day. This was not a lot of defenders' days, considering that both teams got into triple digits. A quiet return for Matthew Cottrell, and a week after his 4-goal game, Orazio Fantasia gets subbed out.
He did kick 1, though, right?
Yeah, pretty early.
Orazio Fantasia.
I have a feeling he could be making his way out again, especially with Jesse Motlop still waiting there. I also want to credit Zach Williams for his 3-goal first quarter, his 150th game, a long time coming, and again, his first side. Williams, that switch to forward looks damn strong. He scored more goals in his past 7 games than in his prior 78, I think it was. And it's going to make things tough for guys like Jack Martin and, going smaller, Fantasia, always Motlop. Thoughts, by the way, on George Hewitt being omitted for this game?
Yeah, probably could have used him. It's funny. I still think there's another level that Williams can get to. I guess he showed some in this game because he had 21 pressure acts, but a lot of games he really hasn't done that defensively. If he could be not just a goal-kicking forward, but also like a pressure forward, because he definitely has the ability to do it from his defense, he'd be terrifying. 3 goals, 4 tackles, 2 assists in this game. Not a terrible loss for Carlton. The Giants needed this and rediscovered themselves, but that they've lost multiple games when scoring in triple digits, and yes, some of those were kind of backdoor scores, that is still a concern for the Blues.
Fremantle 16-9, 105, defeating Richmond 7-12-54. The slippery turf definitely caused miscues, particularly from Richmond. It does make sense that Freo are more accustomed to playing on worse turf and in wetter conditions.
I've mentioned this probably. It's funny that Optus is such a beautiful cutting-edge stadium and yet has such shit turf.
I don't know what it is in terms of the climate or maybe the actual grass growing systems there. I imagine there'll be a lot hashed out before the 2025 season there. It seems like the curators and the league are well aware of that.
You know who actually had great looking grass recently was Levi Stadium for the Ecuador-Venezuela game. It looked perfect. If they can do it, you can too.
I think the 2 best grounds crews in the world are the Rose Bowl and the Adelaide Oval.
Yep, full agreement. So was it also windy or was it just wet? Because I saw what happened to the Richmond banner.
Yeah, got totally trashed. That's never a good omen. They kicked the first 2 goals, then Freo kicked the next 6. Woo! And that was that. And that was despite Caleb Sarong being tagged pretty well by Jack Graham. He had no tackle attempts in the first half, and it was the first time that Graham had tagged this season. Every team at this point needs a tagger. Maybe Richmond have found theirs until he pulls his hamstring. After a roaring start for Josh Tracy, 4 goals in the first half for the Cyclone, he ended up having to shift his role. He did get a 5th, but it took a lot to get there. Once Sean Darcy went out concussed, it forced him into the ruck more as the second option, obviously. Nice to see Michael Walters have a nice return as the sub, had a couple through. And in general, Freo had good flow this game as a whole. Michael Frederick with one of his high impact per touch games, and he's one of the more entertaining players to watch in the league. Richmond did well forcing some longer kicks from defense. They collapsed a bit toward the ball and played some more man defense, but Freo managed to work through it enough, and there was skill there. Also not a good idea to have a second gamer on one of the best hauls in the league right now, because Jacob Blight started on Josh Tracy instead of Ben Miller. I didn't think Blight, though, should have been subbed off. It should have been Noah Cumberland instead, who was almost non-existent in this game and somehow was allowed to play through the full 4 quarters. I do have a bigger question about this game, though, for Richmond, and that is, where does Noah Balta belong? I know your answer, Ethan. Past couple weeks has had a good stretch there up front. It's allowed them to try things out in the back with Blight. You've got Josh Gibkiss and Tyler Young coming back from ACLs at some point next year. So there's room for things still to be moved around.
Well, I've told you my reasoning here. While he's good at both, they need him defensively more. They have other forwards they can throw in there. I think you lock him in as a defender unless you get a super crowded defensive unit, which at this point it's not.
I know you'll keep with that opinion, but Bolton did have a solid game up front, though. And Shea Bolton, active again, still can't get 5 goals. There's another guy who I remember had a bunch of games and just can't get to 5. Am I thinking of Levi Casbolt?
That sounds right.
He's had 9 4-goal games, but never a 5. Casbolt, that is. Shea, in his 128 games, has now had 5 4-goal games.
So I got 2 things from this game. First off, the torn-up Richmond banner looked like a cargo net. Was it windy or just wet? I assume it was also windy, because that doesn't seem like something that happens with just rain.
It was decently hard rain, and it continued throughout the first half more than people expected. I do think, though, it was definitely some wind as well. There were some swirling winds at some games this round. Adelaide Oval had it as well, and that's another thing. You know how the Bulldogs are in the wind, or really they aren't.
And then the other thing was that Justin Longmire said Freo's second quarter was awful, which is funny because they actually won that quarter 20-11 and had one fewer scoring shot.
It's a very, process-oriented mindset there. Not nearly as organized in that quarter. Richmond had him beaten at clearance. It was even in contested possessions. That had been a strength for the Dockers through this year. So long and yet to work tag. Andrew Brayshaw was one of the best, if not the best on ground. I think he had the starring role over Hayden Young this week. Sarong did break through, but Brayshaw was the one who really got it done. And they just didn't find that rhythm again as much in the middle until they had a nice talk at halftime, clearly.
My philosophy is you try to find as many negatives as possible in wins and find as many positives as possible in losses, because the other is kind of easy. So yeah, I'm a fan of that too. Melbourne 17-10, 112, defeating West Coast 8-10, 58. It seems like of the games I need to rewatch or, watch that I haven't seen yet from the last couple rounds, this is not one of them, and I can skip this one. Is that correct?
Eagles played a significantly better second half than first, but they just looked completely uninspired, even more than they would have been just from the skill gap. 45-8 Demons in the first quarter, 71-22 halftime. Jacob Van Rooyen with 4 goals. It was helped by Jake Belcham playing a defensive job on Jeremy McGovern. Melbourne have done a better job as of late getting some more defensive play from their forwards. Bailey Pritch did it against Harris Andrews the week prior. Melksham can do that straight away. Great to see him back and get 2 goals himself. That's an obvious feel-good story there. I've got nothing against the Demons, and I knew how this game would go. Just sucks that Max Gawn did his ankle. He was bothered by it from, I think, a first-minute incident, and it looks like it'll be 2 to 3 on the sidelines for him. Now, Melbourne haven't honestly been able to do great things from the headouts that Gawn has gotten to advantage as of late, so maybe a change in pace might work for them. At this point, I'm interested in who they might bring in. Is this time for the former basketballer, Tom Fullerton? Do you want to bring in Ben Brown again? My guess is Fullerton, because he's been listed as an emergency, and he's much more of a steady ruck. And when Van Rooyen is on a tear as he's been, you don't want to disrupt that.
I think you're going to have to do it by committee.
I could see McDonald and Van Rooyen getting secondary and tertiary opportunities, but more permanent there. And I think they got Fullerton as that sort of cover.
Now, on their list, Fullerton is actually listed as a key forward. If we're going to be technical, they have 2 other players listed as rucks, Will Verrill and Kaya Ferris-White. Will Verrill is 20, yet to play an AFL game. He was drafted in 2022 as a rookie elevation. And then Kaya Ferris-White was also picked up in 2022, and he played some basketball in Canada and the US.
This was a game, though, propelled by the younger Melbourne players and players in newer spots. Caleb Windsor with one of his most active games, largely at outside, quite successful in that. Windsor with a goal from 25, 5 tackles and 4 clearance. Still more of an outside player, but as, it has to be done by committee without Petrarca. Good game going for the back for Judd McVie again. But the real story here is Trent Rivers, who was the clear best on ground in this game. I don't think there should be any debate about that. Rivers with 29, 7 clearances and 5 tackles, asserted himself as the best midfielder. His midfield ability was known, but he had more value in defense until Petrarca went down. But now it's going to be hard to get him into defense once Petrarca returns next year. Also, Rivers has just been overlooked in general because he was the 3rd and last drafted member of the amazing 2019 draft trio, Luke Jackson, Kazi Pickett, and him. That is honestly an unreal draft haul for just 3 picks. In terms of wet toast, Oscar Allen, slow start, 4 goals. Positive with that. He's probably your polished turd winner there. Eagle Nation podcast agrees with me on that. They started to take some risks in the second quarter that led to better entries. The defense still struggled to keep up, especially on rebounds. They keep getting burned on rebounds. There's no surprise They found some success out the front of stoppages the second half. And the other big positive is Jack Hutchinson to actually be useful as something other than just tall marking guy. No Ryan Merrick for some reason, but Hutchinson in and Jack Williams is a tall sub. That's just weird there. But if you got a tall lineup, then they've got to use their physicality all over the... Oh,
something's wrong. Liam Duggan didn't get coaches' votes.
No Eagles got coaches' votes. Oh, yeah, and Jeremy McGovern didn't fly home with the team. Some of it lungs or his or both. It could get worse. It could actually get worse. They're going to get pummeled in the second Western Derby, aren't they?
Is that this coming week? Or no? No, who's this week?
They're bringing the circus into town. They just happen to be the circus, and the Lions will devour them.
Ooh. And then the Western Derby?
No, then it's the Saints, and then Western Derby.
Ooh, that could be... Yeah, this could be a fun stretch. I like that attendance for this game was exactly 32,000.
Don't know the last time we've had something exact like that.
Well, I guess in theory, if we're talking about possible attendance at the MCG, considering if capacity is exactly 100,024, which I think is capacity, then there's a slightly greater chance that those final three numbers for your attendance will be something between 000 and 024. But it's still not much better than like a 1 in 1,000 chance on any given day that the final three attendance figures are going to be 000.
The bet game, the walk game, the surprise of the round. St. Kilda 13-4, defeating Sydney 11-16-82. I feel bad not for myself. I brought this upon myself completely willingly. I feel bad for Logan McDonald. I really do.
I want to know what the heck was in his hair. It looked like a piece of gum or something. I think it might have been some of the oil that guys put on their arms. I'm not sure. But yeah, he missed a shot that would have given the Swans the lead with 53 seconds left. Looked decent at first, and then it ended up fading left. As I mentioned in the open, there were so many things they could have done to win this game. They kicked 0-5 in the final quarter to St. Kilda's 4-2. They led this game. First off, let's just go through the flow of this. The Saints scoring the first 14 points. All right, Swans are slow starters. It was a tight game until the final couple minutes of the second quarter when, in a span of barely 5 minutes, the Swans rattled off a 26-0 run, led by 29 early in the third after kicking 4 straight behinds, one of which was a great spoil by Dougal Howard, where he ended up tumbling into the front row. The Swans kicked 3-11 in the second half.
They really wanted me to do. That's the only answer.
Still felt in total control. They were up 29, and then all of a sudden the Saints made a run to cut it to 64-58 late in the third, and then Isaac Heaney gets a pair of goals in less than a minute, but he also hit Jimmy Webster in the face and is now facing a 1-game suspension that would end his Brownlow candidacy.
I think at this point, Nick Dacos, Patrick Cripps, maybe even Lockie Neal would have overtaken him naturally, but it's still worth noting. There could be an argument about intentional conduct versus careless. However, post-Maynard, they've been a lot less willing to call things careless.
Oh, no, I actually genuinely think this would be careless but high impact. But anyway, after that, it was like, all right, Saints, you had your fun. The superior team's going to pull away, except they didn't. Even after making a sub that looked great, they brought in Taylor Adams for Matt Roberts, and I'm not sure if Adams made an argument to be the sub more often or if he made an argument to just be in the 22 because he got like 3 clearances right away.
That's a tough one because I think Luke Parker's suspension might be ending. I think Wicks is probably the one to go out. Parker would be in right away.
But the Saints cut this to 3 early in the fourth because all of a sudden Matthias Filippo had this crazy motor. I mean, he was good from the start. He was not just trying to involve himself in the forward 50. He played a full ground game and got the 10 coaches votes. And what's funny is you could make a case for, like, if I was making a 5 for this game, I came up with like 15 legit candidates between the two teams.
Well, there were 9 guys that got coaches, so not really surprising there. I think the argument for Filippo, when the game was to be won, he was there to win it. And this is the best full field game that I've seen him play. We knew that he could do it. It was a matter of being given the license. The Saints in general had license to run.
They took the game on, and it was a lot of Filippo, and it was a lot of Liam Henry, who I thought was really, really good in this game.
So the Saints are obviously without Max King for the rest of the year. Do you think the forward structure almost was looking?
No. I just thought a bunch of guys helped out in the aggregate. I thought Tim Membry was much more involved. He had 5 marks. It was actually a quieter game for Darcy Wilson, but you still noticed him. I really liked Mason Wood, even though I like him in a more midfield role. Cooper Sharman got more involved. It was really just got enough out of Sharman and out of Membry to make up for things like a quiet game from Mitch Owens. I think Mitch Owens actually really benefits from King's presence. So no, they do not benefit from Max King not being in there. I thought they have a midfield that's definitely not that good compared to some of the others, but they had enough guys step up in this game. I liked this game out of Jack Steele a lot. I thought it was his best game of the year. I thought, his tackles and contested possessions actually led to something, whereas in other games, at times he's just kind of been there, and it's just like, okay, there's another stoppage. Oh boy, what does it do? This actually flowed and led to action.
His tackles enabled a lot of the other smaller players and some of the other midfielders to do their better work. Phillippo got involved off some of those. Want to credit Ryan Burns for an accurate game as a whole. And yeah, Higgins benefited from that as well. It was on one of the final lead changes, if not the last one. A steal tackle right off the stoppage led to Higgins getting a quick.
That was the one, yes.
I know you were really complimentary of Ryan Burns.
I thought he was fantastic. And it's funny, earlier in the week, Rory Kilpatrick was on Twitter saying how silly it is that a lot of times the best player is just whoever had the most possessions, regardless of impact. Applying that to soccer, just the center halfback had the most dribbles, that means he's the best player. That would be really stupid. Similarly here, Ryan Burns, 22 disposals, 7 marks, does not jump out at you, but he played at such a high quality and had some of those longer kicks, sort of Jordan Dawson-like. And I don't care that his efficiency is listed below 70%. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was the best player in this game. I thought Hunter Clark was also very good. And again, 9 times out of 10, you take the Swans midfield over the Saints, but the Saints midfield stood up, and it was because they had a bunch of different contributors doing that. I will say Chad Warner had a stretch that was really good. That late second quarter run, he was very heavily involved in. So was Heaney. I actually thought Justin McInerney might have been the best Swan, although coaches' votes have Warner as their best, followed by Heaney, and then Ollie Florent. I think it was Florent's best game of the year, so that's a positive.
When it comes to Chad Warner, he is never mediocre. Nothing he does is just meh. It's either, damn, he's involved everywhere, he's dynamite, or it's just, what the hell is he doing? It's kind of a Joe Danaher-like feeling at times. Completely different player, but that kind of all or nothing type thing.
His good moments were outstanding. Good Chad Warner is better than almost anything. The only other player in this round that, at his best, might have been better across all 9 games would have been when Patrick Cripps was at his best in first quarter. I also thought Brody Grundy was good, yet Rowan Marshall gets a coach's vote and Grundy doesn't. I guess Marshall did kind of flip things in the second half a bit.
I'm glad Marshall has continued to have more of his downfield impact, couple goals here. I don't know why it took so long for them to open that up, and I like that it happened at this game, even with no Tom Campbell.
I felt, despite the inaccuracy and expected score and stuff favoring the Swans, I think the Swans deserve to win this game, and I'm sure if you played it out, however many simulations the Swans win the overwhelming majority of them, I really did like how the Saints played in this game. I liked their form. I liked their energy. I just liked the pace they played with.
And they actually won a game with it.
This is probably not a team with a super high ceiling, but I liked this. It's, if they want to be a serious team where their ceiling is more than squeak into finals, they're going to have to add some more or develop guys into legitimate dudes instead of just a bunch of decent. But this game definitely inspires you. Also defensively, both Cal Wilkie and Dougal Howard were outstanding. Wilkie, 26 disposals and 14 marks. Howard, 3 intercept marks. A spoil where he ended up tumbling into the front row. 17 disposals, 9 marks total. Neither ended up with that many spoils, actually. They each got credited with 3, but I thought both were excellent, and Josh Battle was decent as well.
That's a really nice combination there, and Howard's fragility has meant that it's been rare to see all 3 of them in at the same time. While the Saints still have Battle before they get crazy compensation for him and he goes to the Hawks, they'll make that trio look pretty good.
Despite allowing 27 scoring shots, I really liked the Saints defense in this game. And considering the multitude of shots that hit the post, they could have totally allowed triple digits. I still thought for what it was a really high effort game from the Saints defense. So of their 16 behinds, 4 posts, 3 that were rushed, 1 that was touched.
And the touch was the epic Howard play.
But like, I thought for a team that was clearly talented, the Saints compensated really well with a lot of hustle and heart and did the sort of things they needed to compensate. Because a lot of times what they've tried to do to compensate when they're facing a more talented team is they try to just grind you out. And instead, they took this one on. 63 tackles to 41. Telling stat. Also, they won contested marks 15-7.
Brisbane Lions, owners of the longest win streak in the AFL at 5. 14-13-97 over the Adelaide 13-8-86. Never a game where you doubted the Lions' victory, but a game that was kept really unnecessarily close. A lot of the times, especially in the second quarter, Brisbane forwards went for some really ambitious shots rather than looking at the shorter options. The 2-goal-6 in the last didn't help with that either, but it was a sound game philosophically. Meanwhile, it was a brave idea to not have a tag.
Sounds like this was, even if it wasn't the closest game, it sounds like it was a fun watch. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it was. Neil getting out to a blazing start with his first 3-goal game in 6 years. So his first as a Brisbane Lion. And that all came in the first half because for some reason they didn't put a tag to him. Now it ended up becoming difficult really to tag him because the best option for it was the guy who kicked 4 goals for the Crows, their best, Ben Keith. So once they were both hot, really, what would you do from there? They ended up putting Sam Berry on. The nearly useless Lockie Murphy had some of that. I mean, he did limit some things from Neil in the second half, but Murphy should not be getting AFL point over, guys like Zach Taylor, who came in as the sub again. I mean, Murphy's poor in terms of handling and so many other things. I mean, face it, when your greatest contribution in the past 3 seasons is getting a free kick and getting hurt in the final seconds of the game so that somebody else can get a kick, that's not a good reflection. I would have liked for Barry to have been on the tag from the start on either Neil or Dunkley. Either one was an option, really, because Neil had his 3 goals from 36. And
I think tagging Neil is such an easy decision. With respect to Dunkley, we've seen it get under Neil's skin a lot.
You don't tag him. You're just saying, yeah, we'll let you get 2 or 3 of them. And Dunkley, a goal 1 from 35, 7 clearances and 5 tackles himself. The 2 of them work together really well. And when Neil's down, you're not going to be able to stop all of them. But you got to bring the attention to Neil and then Dunkley. And the Crows didn't do that. And from early on, they paid the price. I like how a number of the Crows ended up playing in the end. I mentioned with his 4 goals. I want to credit Mark Keane for a really sound game defensive. He and Harris Andrews were each team's best defenders, respectfully. And Darcy Fogarty popped up late to keep it interesting with another multi-goal game. And Fogarty managed to make life more difficult for Jack Payne as well. But so much of this game for me just hinges on the lack of a tag on Neil.
That's what, 2 weeks in a row or 2 out of 3 that he hasn't been tagged?
And has gone off?
Yeah. This is even when tagging had become like a less common thing. It was such an obvious call. Yeah, Port didn't do it either. It just makes no sense. Maybe the thing with is, Ben Keys can't tag someone unless they have a headband so he can snatch it. Whether it be a headband that keeps goggles on or just a headband, that is kind of his thing.
As I've said, there's Sam Berry. Now, we do, of course, need to talk about the 4-game suspension handed down to Isaac Rankin, who didn't have a bad game. 2 goals from 16, there for the pressure as well. They're out of center square opportunities and off stoppage. But for an off-ball bump that went high on Brandon Starcevich, his head going into Starcevich's chin, he's gotten 4 weeks. And that's not directly to the tribunal. It's just 4 weeks. And to people who are still trying to compare things to Angus Brayshaw and Braden Maynard, do you not remember that the rules changed? Firstly, that post-Maynard, and really the big change that has shaped a lot of MRO and tribunal decisions this season, has been the greater onus that players in general have to have in terms of duty of care when contesting. And secondly, this wasn't a contest. This was as the ball was going past and Starcevich was caught unaware. I'm also just shocked the play continued here. Starcevich was down, Riken was bleeding, and play continued for a bit.
I am literally going to watch this for the first time right now. So you are going to get my live reaction. I have not watched this play.
Now, that was already the second time in the first quarter alone that I criticized umpires and medical staff for not intervening and stopping. The other was when Connor McKenna got Darcy Fogarty's shoulder to his head and then hit the ground. He was down for a bit, and for some reason he was allowed to stay on. Look, if you're trying to make it appear that you're taking things seriously, once you have a player who stays down after that sort of contact, you got to get him off at least for the initial HI. So more criticism there. But more on this Starcevich one, I can start to understand the extent of the penalty when you consider that it was away for the play. And even though it was accidental, that greater duty of care applies this year. So penalties are going to be harsher for these sorts of things than they were in the past.
Okay, after watching, I think this could get reduced to 2 or 3 games because the head was not the principal or intended point of contact. You know, I think he was going for the chest, and yeah, it was careless, but I think some of it was inadvertent. So I get how this could be reduced by a game or 2.
Reduced, that is exactly what I was about to say, Ethan. So thank you. I think it could be reduced to 3 games, maybe 2, but not thrown out. This will not be thrown out.
Although I also would really not be bothered by it being upheld, considering who the Crows play 4 games from now. Not that I should be worried about them coming to Cardinia at all.
You know, Glico was jokingly saying the same thing, and then
I know
it happened. A bit of sloppy play in this one as well.
Was it humid? Well, I mean, it's always humid in Brisbane, but did that affect it?
I think it did a bit as the sun was going down. Sloppy play to end the first quarter in general. When the Crows got into more of a rhythm and made the game close, it was out of uncontested control. Mark Keane, with his strong game, helped with a lot of that. Max Michelini was more following Charlie Cameron. So it was less Michelini in terms of defensive marking presence. Yeah, this defense has really flowed through Mark Keane for a lot of the year, and I'm happy about that. I think that's something to keep doing, even as Nick Murray gets more involved, as he might get more pieces coming in. Maybe when Dan Curtin gets another shot, if that ever happens. But yeah, I did want to say, in terms of the younger guys, yeah, Taylor got on. Billy Dowling actually got involved with some of the defensive play. Neil late, just too late for it to matter. It's awards time, Ethan.
Yeah.
Well, it is a bit of a rewind, considering rewinding through the round to watch these.
All right, last week's Mark of the Week was Mabior Chol over Josh Rotham. Chol was the 4th man into a pack. This week's nominees, you got Jay Bolton taking Noah Balta's centering kick over Jordan Clark and in front of Heath Chapman. Cade Chandler putting his knee into Harley Reid's back and getting leverage. And Kazi Pickett over Josh Rotham.
Josh Rotham is a very adequate stepladder.
Dare I say, perfectly cromulent?
I'm going to take Chandler here, partially because the fact that it's over Reid makes it automatically cooler. And just, I think the greater leverage involved stand out. Kazi's was nice. Shay's was clean. From the that looked cool live standpoint, the Chandler one stood out most to me.
I'm actually going to take Bolton. I'm going to rank them in chronological order. Bolton, then Chandler, then Pickett.
The round 16 goal of the week was Nick Dacos doing Nick Dacos things. 3 kicks off the center bounce, a give and go, a receive, a sidestep. That might just be a finalist.
I still preferred the Paul Curtis goal where he kind of burst through a pack.
You knew that Nick was going to win.
And, yeah.
And it has goal of the year vibes in a Sam Draper type way. Your nominees for this round: James Warple got a tap from Lloyd Meek, faked a handball to Jai Newcomb, and sold both Jack Bowes and Max Holmes before kicking on the run for 48. Then Bailey Fritsch on Sunday afternoon received a Kazi Pickett handball, got away from Brady Hoff with a bit of a stiff arm spin and snapped from the right pocket. That was one of the most active goals I've seen from Fritsch, actually. And then Kai Lohman picked a ball up out of maybe a tackle, maybe a quick touch from off a clearance, and had a really quick check side. He came in on the back of the stoppage. I know that got me watching live. Ethan, who do you take here, though?
I think I'm going to take Warple. Lohman's is cool on, like, rewatch, but I think I'm going to go with Warple because it was such a good fake.
Can't blame people for buying what he was set. I might take Warple as well, though I appreciate it's tough to beat Brady Hoff.
All right, well, think that just about does it for this episode. If you've stuck around this far, appreciate it. And if it was your first time listening, welcome to the fold.
I'm the main character.
Oh yeah, main character for this round kind of has to be you. It's funny, a week ago, I picked myself to be the main character, thinking maybe my messy shirt would do it. Nope, you got it now, but you also have to walk 134 miles.
That's, I think, 216 or so kilometers. And that's if I take the most direct route.
What the fuck is a kilometer?
I mean, considering most people don't know what the difference between 15 and 24.2 meters is Isaac Reichen developing into a main character for the whole season?
I think it's probably still more like Ken Hinckley, but he could be.
Or just Nick Dacos again?
Nah, I think it's been less Nick Dacos because there's less novelty to it. If we were to look on the oval, I guess it would have to be like Logan McDonald, who, by the way, signed on to stay with the Swans, 4-year extension. So if you aren't already following us on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and everywhere else, we're there at Americans Footy, and I'm sure all of those platforms will have various walking updates between planning the route and the actual dates and any potential like associated events we do, whether that be a fundraiser or just something silly.
I'll definitely see if Rick is around. Maybe you could talk with AFL from LA.
And try to get my friend Derek involved somehow. I'm also hoping to get him involved, despite his lack of footy knowledge, as a character. By the way, this is not to be confused with Derek Stata, who has a lot of footy knowledge, and I was able to meet up with a few weeks ago while he was in town.
Individually, I'm at BenjaminHK01 on Twitter. May have some teaching takes there or non-footy sports takes.
I am at Castle Media. Every day I post my immaculate grid scores. I'm really good at remembering obscure baseball players.
And just remember, as Stephen Wright said, anything's within walking distance if you have enough time.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.